Silchester, which is near Reading in the UK. It's a Roman site.
Oh, hang on, Zana.
That's okay.
I told you something would go horribly wrong.
No, we predicted it. It's because I was talking about my boring background.
No, it's entirely my fault. I forgot. So hello, everyone. Now you can actually see us and hear us. It's nice to see you. I ran the intro music. I ran the holding screen. We started the interview. I did not click the go live button. So it was just us talking to each other, which is delightful.
We can repeat that. It was a good trial run.
So let's try that one again. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Digital Hammurabi. I'm Megan. Today I have Dr. Zana 🀭 with me talking about her work and Iraqi heritage and ancient Mesopotamia. I'm very sorry, Zana, that you started to tell us all about your background, only to find out that no one could hear us except myself. So, Zana, thank you for joining me. Would you mind awfully repeating everything you just said and telling us about how you got into the field?
Not at all.
Thank you so much.
So for Megan for the second time, for everybody else for the first time. A slightly wiggly route has ended up where I am at the moment. And I'd started by saying that I'm British Iraqi, and that quite strongly informs kind of the work that I do now. I actually began life, which is how I've ended up being in a classics department and being a Roman archaeologist, apparently, as a classicist. And really that came when I was doing my A-levels, so when I was about 17, 18 at school. And I went in to speak to our school careers person and said, I want to do archaeology. They rolled their eyes at me and said, no, Zina. We've always planned that you would go to Oxford and study classics. Because I was young and a bit of a goody two-shoes and did what I was told, I agreed to do that, applied, got in, but partway through my degree decided to go on a dig in a Roman town called Silchester, which is near Reading in the UK. Completely fell in love with archaeology and that very kind of visceral sense of a connection with the past, that didn't matter how dull the thing was that I'd touched, that feeling that I was the next person in 2,000 years to have touched that object. And it felt like a really direct kind of connection to Roman people, to the past. So I came back, this was at the end of the second year of 4 years of a degree, changed all my options, much to the probably annoyance of my then tutor. Degree at Oxford kind of allows you to kind of build it up in the way that you want to. And then I kind of stayed with archaeology from then on. And after a couple of years working as a commercial archaeologist for a company in Oxford, I then started my PhD, which was based in the Middle East, but in the Roman period. And then I've kind of stayed kind of close to that groove. I've kind of moved around, did quite a lot of work in Britain for a while, and I've come back to the Middle East, which is really where my heart lies now.
Lovely. So I have to say, I know virtually nothing about the Middle East in the Roman period, so this is going to be really good. We tried in my PhD program, the history cycle tries to get you as far through Mesopotamian history as they can, but they only have a year to do it in. And I don't think we made it as far as the Hellenistic period. So I think we finished with the Neo-Babylonians and they said, and there's the Hellenistic period. Yeah. Have a nice summer. We'll see you in August. So this will be lovely. How did you end up teaching at Holloway as a Romanist?
After I finished my PhD, I was actually a research assistant at Oxford for about 8 years on various precarious contracts. I worked then for the professor of European archaeology, Chris Gosden. So I was doing a lot of work on Roman Britain because I had to kind of stay within Europe, really, because that was the job role I had. Then a post came up at Royal Holloway. It had been Amanda Claridge's post before that. She's a very big cheese in the Roman archaeology world, particularly works on Roman Italy and architecture and art. And to be honest, I didn't think I was a great kind of match or replacement for Amanda, because I don't work on Italy. I don't particularly do Roman art. But I gave it a shot.
It was worth doing.
Luckily, they gave me a job. So one of the first things I did when I arrived at Royal Holloway was I taught Amanda's teaching for a year, felt very much out of my comfort zone, and then set up some new courses that focus more on Britain and the Middle East. And I've sort of ended up, in a way, doing a slightly kind of reverse course to the one that you had, where you spent loads of time kind of in the kind of pre-Roman past, because I teach in a classics department. I'm supposed to focus on Greek and Roman things, and I really wanted to teach the Middle East. So I created a course about the Roman Middle East, but that does start in the Uruk period. we zip quite quickly.
That's amazing.
Just now, I couldn't teach all the later stuff without kind of people understanding at least a little bit of what had happened before. So a bit of a whistle stop.
Oh, that's wonderful. That must be a lot of fun to teach.
Yeah.
So we spoke a little bit on Twitter about your current research project, which I think sounds very interesting. Would you mind talking about that for a while?
Of course. So this is a very new project, but it builds on kind of a few smaller bits of work that I've been building up. This is the part that's really close to my heart. So it's a project that comes out of really wanting to do something positive for Iraq and Iraqis in a response to all the conflict that Iraq has suffered for many decades, and particularly in the north, in Mosul, under Daesh. So one of the things that kind of inspired the project, and this is probably a big overshare on a on a big digital platform, but so I have suffered from and managed PTSD for quite a long time, and one of the things that really helped me and helps me still is doing crafting. So I wondered if there was a way to bring together kind of doing crafting, kind of connecting with your identity and your heritage, that might help other people's mental well-being. So I ran a couple of pilot projects in the UK, and it seemed to have some positive results. I'm happy to talk about those more if that's interesting. And then really quite surprisingly, I didn't sort of anticipate that I'd be successful. I put in an application to the British Academy with partners in Southampton, Dr. Emma Palmer Cooper, who's a psychologist, and a partner in Iraq, Dr. Marie Labrosse, who heads up an arts collaborative called Kashkul, which is based under the American University of Iraq in Suleimani. And together we're doing a project that will explore that set of relationships between crafting, heritage and well-being, seeing if we can kind of create a more robust evidence base to see what it is about. There's kind of a lot of anecdotal evidence that things like crafting are very mindful and they help you relax. Seeing if we can pin down what actually works there, particularly what might work for Iraqi participants, that really kind of speaks to them and is meaningful to them, and hopefully therefore kind of go some way at least to providing some relief and way forward from kind of just experiencing conflict for long periods of time.
That sounds amazing. How many participants are you hoping to have to begin with?
Oh gosh, so I would have as many as I possibly can. I mean, one thing is that the workshops, when I run them in the UK, they work really well in very small groups. So I've never really done it with more than 10 people. And partly you need those small groups because it allows people to feel comfortable. It allows people to start talking within the group. One of the most powerful things that came out of the pilot workshops, which were mixed with people from the UK and people from Iraq, was how much kind of reciprocity there was and kind of understanding each other more by the end of the workshop. So I think they have to stay quite small, but we can run quite a lot of those workshops. And one of the things that we want to create, because it works small, it's quite difficult to scale up. But obviously there are many more than 10 people who would benefit from this. So we want to create a kind of toolkit, which would have a brochure for participants and guidance for facilitators to be able for other people to go and run those workshops, so that it doesn't require me or the project. It can kind of build a life of its own, is the hope, if it works. Fingers crossed.
That sounds fantastic. So what kinds of things did you do for the pilot schemes?
So the pilot stuff, so it built out of a slightly kind of less focused project, a project that wasn't focused quite so much on Iraq, which did... we were in museums, in the Petrie Museum in London, which maybe Heba talked about in her episode, and the Great North Museum in Newcastle. And I collaborated with an artist, a photographer, and a creative writing person. And we asked people to come in and respond to objects through those 3 different ways, and just kind of create their own connections with things, not feel tied to what a museum label says or how someone says you have to act in a museum, or not even necessarily knowing anything about the object that you're looking at, just how you respond to it. And they were wonderful. I really enjoyed them. But one thing that was really quite difficult was getting people into the museum. It was very far more difficult than I thought it would be, because for me, a museum is a really comfortable space, and I enjoy being there, and I feel very relaxed when I'm in a museum. But that is not the case for a lot of people, and it seems to be particularly not the case for people from a Middle Eastern background. Of course, that's not everybody, but it was quite difficult to get people in. So in the second version, where I was focusing much more specifically on Iraq, I moved them out of a museum and put them in a school instead, which did seem to help. And in those ones, we just had loads of, obviously we didn't have a museum full of objects to use. So I brought loads and loads of photographs and books and objects that I had, some of my kind of my grandmother's trays and a big pot that's sitting over there somewhere, that my aunt had given me. So objects that had come from Iraq. And I teamed up with a wonderful fibre artist called Karin Celestine. And she does lots of work around with felting. So we did wet felting in those workshops, and everybody created a kind of panel about that big, of whatever they wanted to. So they could kind of mix and match motifs from different objects. They could kind of look at a small detail of something. It was really wide open, kind of what people could do. The only thing they had to do was do some wet felting and create a panel that was about that size. And otherwise, everything was free. You could use whatever colours you wanted to do. You didn't have to do a faithful kind of reproduction. I was really quite strong on that. I didn't want people to feel they had to make something that just looked like the thing that they had inspired them. They could do a neon pink lamassu if they wanted to, and that would be wonderful.
That would be
but we had a wonderful claret and blue one.
Absolutely wonderful. Fantastic. So which parts of that are you planning on replicating in Iraq?
So it's really kind of replicating that latter set of workshops, those ones particularly around textiles. At least that's where we're going to start. I have no idea where we might end up. So my instinct is that because it's a very tactile activity, that there's something quite important about that kind of touch element. For me, anyway, I'm terrible at drawing. So that's really intimidating for me. But for some reason, what I can't draw, I can make with wool. And I'm hoping that might be the same for a few other people. and you can always make something, even if it's not, stunning. Whereas if you're drawing, it's kind of immediately obvious if it's a bit rubbish.
And I feel with drawing,
something you'll be proud of.
Yeah, exactly. With drawing, it's very easy to start and spend an hour on preliminary sketches and erasing stuff and redrawing it, and then you get so frustrated that you're not making any progress and you don't like what you've done.
Yeah.
And like felting and textile arts, you can't like erase stuff and try again. You just kind of go for it.
Yeah, and it's it's quite easy to with needle felting, you can kind of just pick stuff off and kind of pull it off, and or you can cut it, so you can kind of mash it up quite a bit if it goes a bit wrong, and or you can just be inspired by the colours of something and say, okay, I'm just going to do that really vibrant lapis lazuli blue and make a flower, and it could be really simple. And there was a whole range of some people did extraordinarily detailed, really actually quite accurate kind of replicas. There was one wonderful kind of panel that did the one of the bull's heads from one of the liars, whereas other people did much simpler designs, and all of them worked, and everybody was happy with what they produced, and it didn't matter that whether you'd done it before or not. So I'm going to try and replicate that. One thing that I really want to come out of the workshops is that so I've kind of started off with an initial idea, but I'd be very, very happy if at the end, in kind of 20 months time, towards the end of the project, it has radically changed. It could be ceramics by the time we end, and that would be absolutely fine. What I want to happen is that the people who come kind of dictate what happens, not me, because it has to work for that community. And so maybe everybody hates felting, and that's just a me thing, and people want to do drawing, or they want to do ceramics, or they want to sing, or whatever it happens to be, but that's what I'm hoping to kind of find out in it, is what works for people. And of course everybody is going to respond to a slightly different thing.
That sounds absolutely amazing and very exciting.
That's my cat running up the stairs. If you can hear squeaking in the background.
Oh, well, it sounds just interesting academically speaking, but it also sounds like an incredibly valuable project to be running. What kinds of people did you have taking the workshops in the UK?
So that was quite interesting. It was really quite a range. So like I said a bit earlier, we opened it up to anybody who wanted to come. So you didn't have to be Iraqi to come. So there were kind of three main constituents, probably, of people who were from Iraq, or like me, British Iraqi, so kind of some link to Iraq. People who liked crafting, and particularly were fans of Karin Celestine, who runs workshops and has a kind of huge fan base of people who love her little creatures that she makes. And people who were learning Arabic, who wanted to kind of get a bit more of a sense of some of the culture as well. So quite a range of people, also quite a big range of ages. There were people from kind of 16 years old up to kind of 60, 70 who came, predominantly women, but not exclusively. And quite a few people who came either with friends or in a little family group. And that seemed to be one thing actually that helped with people's anxiety, was coming with somebody. So for some people, even kind of getting in the room was quite
a difficult thing to do.
And was a real achievement for them, and they felt really proud that they'd made it there. So that kind of flexibility that you can come with your friends, you can bring your children,
really whatever makes you
work.
Josh actually has PTSD, and that anxiety surrounding even just sometimes leaving the house, even if we're going somewhere that he knows, it's a lot easier for him if I'm going with him, or if the children are going with him, just having an extra person there is very important.
Yeah. And I think it means that, you know, because there can be a lot of social anxiety as well, and meeting new people. You know, I, like most academics, slightly introverted, so you know, it's not always that easy.
It's why I like Twitter so much.
Yeah,
I can meet everyone I'm going to see at a conference online first.
In fact, I always think it's some kind of form of weird torture that we do to ourselves as academics, that we all go to conferences and we force ourselves to be sociable for like 3 whole days. It's awful. So coming with a friend, someone who can kind of hold your hand either literally or metaphorically, was important. And also how we set it up as well. Obviously, the last thing I want to happen is that anybody comes out feeling worse from having to. So kind of how you set up the room. So, you know, making sure there's plenty of tea and coffee, that there are biscuits and cake, and, you know, that there are no expectations to kind of achieve anything while you're in that space. And I often craft alongside, and when we were doing the ones in the museums, I would draw, even though I'm terrible at drawing. So that to kind of balance out, like in that space, I'm not the expert. I'm just a kind of amateur crafter like anybody else. I'm just, you know, I can knock a few things together, but I'm by no means a professional crafter. And I think that helps kind of break things down and mean that everybody feels a bit more at ease. I don't do any big lectures at the beginning or anything weird like that. You know, doesn't matter if you don't know anything about the stuff that you're looking at. It's just how you respond. How you feel. If people want to ask questions, they can, and if I know the answers, then I'll give them. So kind of getting that kind of really kind of gentle, open atmosphere is quite important, I think.
Are you planning on using the same source materials in Iraq, or are you going to change it for a different audience?
So one thing I asked people to do if they wanted to was bring their own things, and one person just brought some postcards of various sites across Iraq. So I think I'd be very happy for people to bring their own objects or things that speak to them. So I'll probably bring a whole kind of pack of pictures just for someone who needs a bit of inspiration. But we also asked, not in any big way, but just a little question out on Twitter if anybody had anything that they would kind of feel was their heritage. And one of the most beautiful responses was from a man called Amin Mokdad, who's, people might know him. He's a violinist, and he is the person who, he went and played his violin part in the middle of the city when it was being liberated, because he hadn't been able to play music. That was one of the many things banned. And he replied his what he would choose if he was coming to the workshop were baboon flowers, which are kind of daisy-like flowers, and he sent us a picture. So we incorporated that. We took some pictures of those. That was actually one of the things that I made. If people want to bring their own thing, or, you know, and it can be, you know, I also took my grandmother's trays, which were just kind of humble home objects. So it can be anything really that speaks to people. It can be a big fancy monument, but it can also be something simpler and more personal than that.
That sounds wonderful. Did and this might not be a question that can be answered. Did you, it seem as though the Iraqi participants were particularly engaged with the more Mesopotamian side of things, or was it?
Not really, no. I think people all engaged with kind of Iraqi things. Now that might just be because those are the kind of materials we had for people to kind of look at. But I wouldn't say there was an obvious difference between what people chose. And there was quite a range of things. There were, you know, a couple of lamassus, a couple of other people kind of took inspiration from some Neo-Assyrian panels. Some people chose some of the kind of tiling patterns that used to be on the Hadba minarets. So yeah, there was a real range.
A nice variety.
Yeah. Some very modern things. Quite a few people liked I'm just going to grab it off the windowsill. So this is one of the pots that we use. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, that's lovely.
Lots of people love this because it is a beautiful shape. So that got used a couple of times. So yeah, a real range of different things.
That's fantastic. I'm going to break very quickly. If you are watching and you have a question for Zana, please put it in the chat. I will keep an eye out and we'll be asking her those as they come in. Go for it. We can get some slightly off the wall questions sometimes, so people are very used to me saying, I don't know what the answer to that is.
Okay, so no pressure to
no, absolutely none.
Knowledge.
Absolutely none.
Very good, because I'm not.
No, one of my, actually, I think the most common response that I give is, that's something I have never, ever looked into. I can give you my gut reaction, but that's really the best I can do. Which is why, honestly, it's so nice to have a variety of guests on, because everyone can answer questions in their own specialty that like I don't have, because, well, why would I? So when are you planning on starting the project in Iraq?
So the project has started.
Oh, fantastic.
In a very quiet way. So we're just kind of getting set up. We really only started a couple of weeks ago, so very early days at the moment. One of the first things we want to do is recruit 2 research assistants who will be based in Iraq. So if anyone's listening in Iraq and really wants to get involved, keep your eye out. Those adverts will be out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Please apply. And then once we've got our full team together, we'll start advertising the workshops and getting people in for those. So it's a 20-month project. Okay. So it'll go on for
it's very exciting that you got funded for it.
I can't actually believe
that's incredible.
I did. It was a very long shot, I felt, when I put in the application. I mean, I have complete faith in the project. Obviously. But I didn't know whether other people would go for it. But I'm absolutely delighted that other people see the relevance of it. And in particular, because some of the responses I had in the UK, so when I was doing the second set of projects, the textile ones, I asked various refugee charities if they wanted to get involved, and I had some really quite disappointing / hurtful responses. And the one that kind of stands out in my mind is someone who was very polite, but said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, but we do helpful things."
Wow.
Which is a bit kind of...
Thank you.
And I felt a really narrow view of what is helpful.
Definitely.
Because, of course, people need help filling in forms and navigating various governmental structures, and all of that is extremely important and needs to be done. People also need joy in their lives and personal fulfillment and kind of feeling that they belong and can connect with
other people.
The place they've come from and the place that they're in. So I was really upset that was the response.
And especially if you've come somewhere as a refugee, I feel like a project like that would be incredibly helpful just to meet people. Yeah. And that was one of the most beautiful things to watch happening in the room, actually, were people properly interacting. And for some of the UK participants, it was really eye-opening for them. And so I asked everybody after the workshops, and I have full permission to share any of these comments, to reflect on how they feel the being in the workshops had affected kind of their personal and social well-being. And one person replied that they kind of heard about Iraq all the time in the news, but they'd sort of
they didn't take that much notice of it. But doing these workshops had made it 3D to them rather than 2D. That was how they phrased it. So it was really important for kind of raising understanding and for people to be able to meet people that they would never be in a room with otherwise. And I hope to get those sort of mixed groups in Iraq as well, which will probably be a bit of a challenge. But if I can do it, breaking down some of those tensions could be really powerful, I think. So and kind of going back to the refugee charities, if we can do it and we can prove it's successful and we can come back with a data set and say, look this
does something,
and we've measured it and we can prove it, then hopefully no one has that response again, or it's much more difficult to just dismiss this kind of work.
We've had a comment, Josephus Rivero says, history and culture are about as important as it gets, really. Which I have to say I don't disagree with.
yeah, absolutely.
Will you be partnering with or trying to partner with similar organizations in Iraq, or are you keeping it more central?
So if people would like to partner and get involved, I'm very open to hearing from people. One of our project partners is an NGO who work a lot with volunteers. So it's an Iraqi setup NGO run by Iraqis, and they coordinate lots of volunteer activities all throughout Iraq. So we'll be working with them and hoping to kind of have some kind of reciprocity. Obviously they have links with a lot of people. We can maybe provide some opportunities. So I mean, I'm very open, very collaborative, I hope, in my spirit. So if people want to get in touch, they'd be very welcome to.
Fantastic. And if by some chance of fate you are watching and you do run some kind of organization in Iraq and you feel you would be a good fit for Zana, I'll put her Twitter details in the description so you can get in touch with her on there. You can also Google her, and you'll find her faculty page at Royal Holloway University. I will get that name right one day.
It's a bit of a mouthful.
I get
Roho is my short.
I get all the right words. They're just not in the right order.
That's most of my life.
We actually have had 0 questions. And ordinarily we'd have questions taking up the rest of it, but I think everyone is either considering what you've said or not sure
what not be quite what they're expecting.
And I actually don't have any more questions. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to talk about?
Oh gosh, that's putting on the spot. Gosh,
no is an absolutely fine answer.
I mean, I could talk about some of my work around Reconstruction.
Oh yeah, definitely.
People, So it's probably the other arm of inspiration for the crafting project is a response and a reaction against a lot of the projects that have sprung up following cultural heritage destruction in Syria and Iraq, and trying to find ways where we can do work that is more flexible than a lot of those projects are, and to try and kind of particularly move away from what feels like digital colonialism, and the kind of trying to reclaim or just claim the heritage of Syria and Iraq through Reconstruction projects. So that's kind of another element of the work.
That's interesting, and I'd never actually considered Reconstruction projects in that light.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So and I think quite a lot of people, I think for a lot of people, the kind of initial response to it is that, oh well, it must be a good thing. Of course it should be rebuilt. But once you kind of scratch the surface of that initial reaction, things get a little bit more complicated, I think. because you need to start asking what should be rebuilt, by whom, whose decisions, in what way do you rebuild it? Do you 3D print it? Do you bring in craftspeople? So there's a whole load of questions that very rarely get asked, or certainly for me felt that they were not asked when a lot of these projects were set up. People just went in and said, well, of course I can
fixing it.
This, yes. And I was like, well, does anybody want it fixed? And who, there's also kind of big political questions. Who are you potentially bolstering a regime by fixing certain things and not others? So all of these things, I think, need a bit more careful kind of thought and consideration.
Very interesting. And we do actually now have a couple of questions. People are saying, yes, there's just a lot to think about. Vibrantly Brantley says, are you getting people more familiar with the past or being more comfortable with refugees?
I think a little bit of both. So I think it can. I think what's the beauty of this sort of work is it cuts across lots of ways of raising understanding over lots of different issues in very gentle ways. So at the same time as teaching someone how to needle felt, you can also be explaining what a lamassu is, and also saying why this is important to someone who might be from Iraq. So you can be doing all sorts of things in a very kind of gentle, not kind of in your face kind of way, while someone's just having a cup of tea and a biscuit. And I think that's quite powerful, actually, to do things kind of gently and quietly.
I suspect it's probably more effective as well than some other methods.
Yeah, and certainly people who came who didn't know very much about Iraq went away and read books about it. Some people went straight after and went to the workshops took place in Oxford. They went to the Ashmolean Museum to go and look at things. So it had kind of
a knock-on
effects. Yeah, that
fantastic.
People went away and looked at things in different ways.
Zupater says, are there any particular sites in Iraq you'd like to explore?
Oh gosh, I don't know the answer to that question. There's too many.
All of them.
So I have very strong family links to northern Iraq, and in particular to Mosul. Kind of sites around there would probably be my answer. But I also love stuff in the south. And just this afternoon, I was making a little Mashushu dragon. I was needle felting it. So yeah, gosh, I don't know. It feels like choosing your favourite child.
Oh, wonderful. Tim Smith, I think, joined us a little bit late. He says, what time period of Iraq do you research?
So because I've had a slightly long and wiggly kind of way over here, my current research really is contemporary. It's about what kind of modern people in Iraq want. So in that sense, it doesn't focus on any particular time period in the past. And my work up to this point has predominantly been the Roman period, which has shoved it a little bit further west. So the Roman Empire occasionally kind of went over the other side of the Euphrates, and the borders kind of shifted a little bit. So it's occasionally before that kind of veered into kind of sites like Hatra. But prior to this particular project, I've worked more in Syria.
Lovely, thank you. Powell Anderson, the only question I can think of is, could you please keep up the good work and the enthusiasm?
Oh, bless you. Thank you. I will do my very best. Thank you.
We have one for me. Donna Noble is asking how she checks if she has a revised copy of our Sumerian grammar. There will be a correction sheet that you can download from the website. I haven't put it together yet. As soon as it's up, I will let everybody know. But that is probably the best way to check whether you have the revised version. Sorry.
Hello, puppy.
We're going to have puppy snuggles because someone's getting a little antsy.
Oh.
Thank you, sweetie. This is River. He joined our family today and is being introduced to the whole world.
Hello, River. Very cute and fluffy.
He's lovely. Christopher Golding, should the illegal collections of clay tablets be scanned, 3D printed, and then returned to Iraq?
They can be scanned and 3D printed. They should definitely be returned to Iraq.
Excellent. Yes, return it all. And N.H. Joanna is asking, are you Assyrian?
No, I'm Arab.
There we go. And I think that is everyone's questions. I don't think I've missed anyone. Zena, thank you so much. This was absolutely fascinating, and I hope the project is a great success.
Thank you.
And if you at all feel like after you've completed the project coming back and telling us about what a great success it was,
yeah, sure, hopefully I can kind of show some of the things that people have made, and then I'll have my robust evidence set.
You can go back to the refugee charities and say, look, this is important. Well, thank you so much. I will.
Thank you.
Wrap
it's been a
things
pleasure
up.
to talk to you.
Oh, it's been very enjoyable.
I hope it wasn't too different for your audience.
No, I think everyone was very interested. I certainly was very interested. So, really, that's all that matters. We really just do this for my benefit. Having an audience.
We'll very soon have like a project blog and
fantastic
Instagram and all of that. But and I'll let you know when it's there, and people who are listening.
Well, as soon as we know that, I'll put it in the description so that they can go and look.
Brilliant.
Yes, for more information. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It was lovely to see you.
And thank you for all your questions.
Yes, they were good questions. And until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?